Talk Show. Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 686. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Matt Lungeth. Today is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. Matt, how you doing today?
Eric, I am well. It has been a hot minute since I've been able to join you folks here over on the podcast, but I'm glad to be here with yourself and our guest, Gareth Edwards, today to talk all things holodeck, rather. In the meantime, on the EUC front, a name has been chosen, but I shall not say it here. But things are progressing with the EUC spin-out. The naming of that and that release is imminent, so stay tuned. But my favorite question, sir, that, again, I haven't been able to ask in a while. How are you? How are things out on the West Coast? And most importantly, what is the color of the bay?
Hey, it is a beautiful sunny day here in California in the 70s. So I think it's 74 degrees, sunny and perfect. So good California weather. Everything's starting to dry out. We got some rain going last week, but I think the rain is finally subsiding, maybe. So beautiful, sunny California, and everything is growing like weeds. So, grass is tall. Cherry blossoms are out, beautiful blossoms on the tree. So Northern California is a really nice place to be right now. Color of the bay is just a muddy green because we guys still had a lot of rain running off the hillsides in California. So it is pretty. I'm doing well, Matt. I'm excited to come into the season of Explore Call for Papers. So Call for Papers went out last week. If you're interested in doing a paper, the community sessions are happening. VMUG is helping us with the community sessions this year. So V Brownbang was not able to participate this year, and so Alistair has decided not to be here, but VMUG has stepped in, and so the community sessions will continue on. And in fact, to submit your papers for the community sessions, which are usually 15 or 30-minute quick talks, you can go to the Call for Papers link on the Explore site and select Community Quick Talks for your submission, and those will come into us. And as always, we arbitrage those and look for the best ones. And a lot of times we have enough openings for almost everybody. Like between Alistair and us, we've always actually had space for the community talks. Same with the VMware Code Talks; those are happening. So excited to kick those off and look for the great ideas that are coming in. Several people have offered up some why be a community talk ideas already. So happy to see those come in too. I know Corey, you did one last year as well. So Matt, that's what's happening. I got to ask you, I know you're not allowed to say the name or anything like that, but do you like it? Oh, now you're going to shoot yourself. Never mind. The pause said it all.
I have learned a lot about what goes into naming a modern company. It is not just the name. It is the availability of domain names. It is the availability of trademarks. It is, in a global organization, the impact that a certain name may have amongst languages, ethnicities, and religions. So there is an entire process, right, that goes into naming selection. And there's organizations and consulting firms, as you can imagine, that make quite a bit of coin, so to say, and rightly so, in this selection process. So you could think of the best name in the world, and any one of those factors could throw it off significantly.
Yeah, that I remember when they were naming Tanzu and Fusion and a lot of the modern apps names, and it is tricky. You got to go look through trademarks. You got to go look through how it does internationally, and availability. My favorite one is there was a exercise bike that they sell at Costco, and they named it Pooboo, Pooboo, right? So I want to get my, and a friend of mine bought one, and then they gave it to me because it broke, and I fixed it. So I still ride on my exercise bike, which is named Pooboo, right? And that somebody in another country named that, right? And had no idea that Pooboo in a U.S. market might be a silly name, right? So all kind of things goes into that for sure. I remember when Fusion first came out, it was Kubernetes. I wanted to call it KSX, right? And tried to work with CMO and the people, we had NSX, we have ESX, and why wouldn't we just have a hypervisor that runs, Kubernetes workloads and just call it KSX, right? And went to look and see if I could get the KSX domain, and I could, right, for some dollar amount. But lot goes into names, right? So cool, yeah.
Skyline will still be my favorite. I think we hit a home run with Skyline. It's succinct. It describes the product of what it does. But you can't have that all the time. Every once in a while, you hit it right. That there is the availability of the name, the idea, and it accurately describes what the product does in some instances. So, stay tuned. More news on that front coming shortly.
Before we get to our guests, let's swing by Corey Romero. I know he wants to do a drive-by and then take off. So, Corey, I think sub programs for the experts are ramping up. What's going on?
Yeah, so we just closed voting a little bit late. We had a few people that ran into a bug here or there, but we were able to get them caught up. And so sub-program applications closed today. And voting is going to start immediately. I've already alerted all the program leads, so that's happening now. The award announcements, we're still tracking for April 12th. If that is delayed, I will let everyone know. I don't anticipate it to. I will be voting on pro applications and vSAN applications this year, and the rest will be handled by the sub-program leads. And after that, we will have appeals, of course, and those appeals will go to myself and then out to the leads. And there is a total of 7 days to get your appeal in so we can get a decision made for you.
Fantastic. Nice to keep that running, and excited to see who ends up being pros, and teaching all the pros how to do the appropriate voting for next year's the experts. And then I think you do a call for the experts, they'll get to vote their first time sometime in August when you do the second call, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Keep everybody business. All right, Gareth Edwards. Matt, why don't you kick it off? I think we're going to be talking about Holodeck, which to me means how to do home lab with VCF, but I don't know what everybody else thinks it means. So take it away.
Well, before we get to that, as we always do, Gareth, why don't you give us a quick side pitch, if you will, on yourself and a little bit of your background and your current role and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, sure. So, some of you may have heard from me before. We're actually joking just before we kicked the show off that I was actually about 52 episodes ago. We did a whole one about communities. And ironically, that is where I've come from with my career. So, many moons ago, I was that same stereotypical British geek at the back of a room, wouldn't say hi to anyone, and actually did my first talk through VMUGs. So over the years, I've just got a bit more.
And when was that? When did you give your first presentation? Do you remember?
I believe it was way back in 2007, I think, off the top of my head. So it's quite some time ago now. So kind of looking back and going, wow, it's just one of those things is everyone jokes, you get that bug and it just comes and it grows and it grows and it grows. I as anyone can say, once you've done it a few times, you do get that bug. I've gone from not wanting to talk for 10 minutes all the way to people can't shut me up after an hour. People say, well, how far have you come? I said, just looking back at the last year, we've all went through some turmoil, which we'll probably get to. Is looking back, I sat and thought, wow, I spoke at VMware Explore this year. From someone who wouldn't say hello to anyone to being on one of the stages was just, you wouldn't believe it had happened. But, that career growth, especially through like the vExpert program, that's what kind of kicked a lot of this off. The love for home labs, the love for the community, and just growing that. I went from a customer to working to an OSP to bailing back out to working with some of the biggest kind of, bigger VMware customers to eventually working for VMware now by Broadcom. So, that's kind of everything in a very quick nutshell. But, my love for all this has always come from wanting to give back to the community. That's what's driven me in my career. So I'm kind of glad to be back again.
And your current role with VMware?
So there is a proper professional name for it, and I always get it wrong. It's like field application something. I always get it wrong. So I just first myself as a solution engineer. I'm sorry if anyone from the brand police or anything is listening. But when I try and converse that with customers, they go, "So you're a solution engineer?" I was like, "Yes, I am."
Fair enough. So let's talk a little bit about Holodeck, right?
Mhm.
First of all, let's start at the very basics. What is it? And
So-
what are we trying to achieve?
Essentially, Holodeck is a bubble, a very secure bubble of a whole infrastructure. The whole complete stack. Or as I think a few of us, this may be something from across the pond. We joke as everything on the truck. So you can have everything from the hypervisor all the way up, built in a robust, dare I say it, very succinct fashion. So you know everything is right. Everything is in the right place. Everything's configured correctly. And the best thing of this is repeatable, and it's also secure. So it's all in its own kind of self-contained ecosphere. So if something goes wrong, you can rebuild it. If you want to go kick the tiles on something and start breaking things, it doesn't matter. You're not going to affect any underlying hardware. It's all abstracted away. And that's what the beauty of Holodeck is for me, is it's a very robust, well-proven infrastructure.
And when we say everything on the truck, let's be a little bit more clear about that as far as what's included within this deployment automation.
So out the box, you can have something called a management cluster. So you can deploy vSphere, NSX, and then on top of that, you can deploy Tanzu if you so wish. And this all then starts coming into how much hardware you've got available to you. And then you can start deploying further supplements as well. So you can go some of the ARIA stack as well. So the only thing that ever constrains you with this product, or this, I wouldn't say a fling, it's become a bit more productized now, is your ability to deploy a well-known infrastructure to wherever your limits are. Best thing for me was consistent Tanzu deployments, and I think that was by far my biggest way of learning on it.
And let's talk about minimums, right?
Mhm.
Because one of the key advantages out there for Holodeck is what would normally be in a production environment, a pretty extensive cluster as far as the hosts and the resources,
Mhm.
and checking the box as far as the HCL. In a home lab scenario, what would be the minimum requirements, or what could we get away with?
So this is again what kind of spurred my blog on. I always was told, and again, apologies to the team. The Holodeck team are amazing, but I don't always like coloring inside the lines. None of us home lab people do. So I was like, well, how far can we get away with this? The bare minimum on the official list is that you have 2 sockets and 16 cores. CPU is important, but I don't think it's as important as some of these other facets. It does also ask for 384 gig of RAM and nearly close to 4 terabytes worth of SSD storage. So that's quite, as you said, quite an amount, or quite an outlay. Again, even in me writing this article, just a couple of months ago, things have moved on. Some things have become a bit more achievable. But I started kind of kicking tires and going, well, actually, how little can you get away with? I wish it was a golden number of 256 gig of RAM, but it's not. The smallest I could get away with without sacrificing any kind of major things breaking was about 280-ish gig of RAM. Depending on, because again, this is where everything gets a bit grey now. As DDR5 RAM, you can now have mismatched sizes. So I think the number I came up with somewhere was 288 gigabytes of RAM. If you get around there, everything plays nicely. And you can also get away with about a 1 terabyte SSD if you don't want to get too big. You don't want too many logs. You don't want too much running at once. If it is just for you kind of, I hate them, kicking the tires, understanding some of the products and just having a bit of a play, those are the bare minimums you can get away with. You could get away with 1 processor with lots of cores, but I have found in some instances that dual socket, you do get some marginal performance gains as well from that.
Okay. And we have talked about this article, and we're also talking about domain names, and you have one of the best. So for those listening along, Gareth's article is over at Virtualized Fruit, Again, virtualizefruit.co.uk to follow along with this blog article. And back to those minimum requirements, we can put all of this in a single host, correct?
Correct. I've done it with a single host. If I really want to start stretching my legs, I'm going to make a call out to James Kilby. We've actually spread this across 2 hosts because we also appreciate, sometimes bang for buck. You've got to go get some hardware. I've got this running on a single HP DL380 Generation 9, and it works absolutely fine. Here in the UK, I don't know if it's different. I've found them as cheap as, I think, if I got the exchange rates right, without all the RAM, about $200 just for the server itself. So again, you're talking less than a nut these days. So, there is enterprise-grade hardware out there that you can run this on, out on secondhand markets.
You can find a couple generations. I just have always used Dell equipment for my home lab for no other reason other than that's what I used when I was running a data center. Our 720s, 420s, where you're running into a lineage of Intel procs that may or may not have vSphere 8 support, can be found in the $100 to $200 range all day long on eBay or your trading site of choice for out there. So again, to your point, for what is the cost of a NUC, if you want to run more, let's call it enterprise grade hardware, of course you don't need to, but if you would want to go down that path, it's out there to be found.
Yeah. And again, when I inject here, technology's come on. While I've been, one other thing I'm really fortunate is to be a vExpert Pro for my community. So again, I've been mentoring people on this. Just seeing in the last couple of months. I don't have it to hand at the minute, but you can get little NVMe adapters now for very cheap from some very well-known websites, be that your Amazons or, should we say, certain import websites for as little as between £8 and £16. And then you get full PCI speeds on NVMe. So, again, there's other, it's not on the HCL, admittedly, but there are very creative ways you can get quicker hardware into some of these older servers.
So besides the proc and the RAM requirements, are there anything else that we need to be worried about as far as HBAs or drive requirements? I know we did call out, minimum level of storage, but anything else that would be on there on that, let's call it quasi HCL to get this deployed properly?
Personally, I found better performance, especially with the cost of NVMEs now. You can pick up 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte NVMEs for fairly cheap now. The irony is it's probably going to cost you nearly as much as the server, which might put some people off. You can get away with, if you're going to start getting to that kind of 2-tier and sharing servers, there might be a bit higher barrier there. So, you can just about get away with some of this on Synologies, but you do start getting occasional scripts failing or taking longer. My advice is to get it the most robust way is absolute bare minimum an SSD. Not to sound like brand police, I normally go for something like a Samsung Pro because they normally have really good sustained writes and reads. And that's the key.
If you're going to invest into an SSD, right, the better, take the time to read up on it. And I'm no expert by any means, but enterprise class drives for even a home lab is, I would say, minimum stakes in the game because of the rate intensity that you're going to have potentially for some of the workloads you're going to be deploying.
So it's exactly that. You want that read and write ability, but definitely the writes. There is something that will happen actually a lot on this, and without getting too nerdy today, is you will see a lot of ballooning quite often. So you want that write speed. That's absolutely kind of, dare I say, mission critical. And that's why I kind of, be very careful with what I say is, you could get away with spinning drives, but then you do need to compensate with RAM or CPU there. Just try and keep up with that. So it's finding that balance of what you've got available to you. But then again, I've seen 1 terabyte NVMe drives for sub $100.
Yeah, I was going to say they're really cheap now, right? 2 terabyte SSD is not a big deal.
Yeah. And again, especially if you start them running nested vSAN, you're talking nested vSAN for a couple $100. You can't really go wrong. So there are plenty of ways of getting, we're talking anywhere up to, is it 7,000 megabits a second these days. So normally the disk is no longer the bottleneck.
We'll get to nested vSAN in a minute, because I think it's one of the great advantages of this particular deployment. But I want to get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts, right?
Mhm.
So just again, we're level setting for the listeners out there. Is this something that's deployed in Fusion or Workstation, or do we need to do a base level install of ESX and then we're deploying to it? Walk us through how that nested instance works, and then the tooling that we're using to automate all of this, the deployment of the stack.
And
Sure.
and where do you get it? Right, like where do you go pick that up?
I will pop a link in the chat so hopefully everyone can pop that in the show notes. But it is is via.vmw.com/holodeck-20. Ironically, 2.0.
20, not spelled
20.
out. 20 dash
Yeah,
20.
dash 20. Yeah, sorry. You will need some physical gear for this. And I've got to actually call out the team here. They've done an amazing job of actually, brilliant instructions. Everything click by click. There's videos in there. There's imagery. It's a really great guide. So I can highly recommend following this step by step. As we joke there, you will need some hardware. You can try and do this in Workstation Fusion if you have Intel-based architectures, but it's a bit more tricky. If I were you, invest in some decent hardware, install a very base level of ESXi, and again, it doesn't necessarily need to be the latest version of ESXi. Of course, it's better if it is, but I have been working with some people who will be deploying, say, version 7, because that's all their hardware can support, and they will run a version of Nested 8. So there are ways you can kind of work around some of the constraints there. There are some flags I've listed within my article where we kind of work around some of the hardware flags and trick it into booting. So you will need an ESXi host. And this might be a weird segue, is I actually had, while I'm mentoring someone, it's something I'm now seeing in the industry, is there are people who've never touched hardware. There are people entering this community and our industry who have been very used to just consumption based. They're used to clicking on something and just
absolutely
accessing a resource.
Right? Application owners, developers, right? At the entire Tanzu space, we're now seeing where there would just be consumers of the service, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I often use the overly simplified analogy of they're just plugging the appliance into the wall. They didn't necessarily know how the electricity was made. And now, because of roles and whatnot, or they're trying to understand a little bit more of the back end infrastructure, they're starting to play around with this more.
Yeah. So
before we go too far down the road here, I just want to ask, the via.vmware.com/holodeck-20, who's producing this? Because it links out to a share site, share drive, and I just got to clarify for everyone, who's actually building this bundle and who's updating it on occasion?
So there is a whole team behind that. I don't have all their names, but I'm quite happy to get those.
When you say a whole team, is it VMware? Is it a community
VMware
project?
Yeah. So it was born from a community project, but there is now a team at VMware who is now managing and supporting the Holodeck initiative.
All right, thank you. Yep. Okay, great. I always have to clarify that because as I'm running the Flings site, no one can go to weird domains and pick up bits anymore. They won't even go to a Dropbox anymore. If it doesn't come from VMware.com or Broadcom.com, their institution won't let them download anything so I looked at this share and I was like, who actually is owning this? So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and actually one of the very key components that actually underlies some of the holodeck build is actually, I do know this, I reference it in my article, is from Ben Sear and US Benny. They actually created something under there called the VCF Lab Constructor, and it's a brilliant bit of community-based initiative out there. So there is a bit within this whole stack that is a VMware Flame that is an absolutely essential bit of software. So many thanks to them. They made my life a lot easier.
Okay.
Back on to, let's say, the deployment utility itself.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we standing up an OVA once we have that host install and we're importing a massive OVA, or how do we get started with this?
So there is a little kind of preamble to this. So there is a website which you have to follow step by step. So there is a whole list of things you need to download on a workstation. So ideally a Windows workstation to kind of build this kind of perfect image, or it's actually an ISO, not an OVA, believe it or not, which you actually import into the host. So you'll go away, get the Holodeck kit from the link I've just mentioned. That will download a load of tools, and you start putting some of these files within those folders. You double click a PowerShell script, and it starts building an ISO. One other key thing to get there is, at the minute, go speak to your friendly VMware solution engineers, I'm going to call them, because they can hopefully help you get a VCF key, or again, a massive way, if this is going into a home lab, massive call out for VMware Advantage. That's the way I consume this, because you get a 1-year key. I believe it's, again, a couple $100, and it's probably by far one of the best investments. And you, again, then get a whole year of a VCF license. So that's, again, another massive shout out to the VMware Advantage there. Within these downloads as well, you do get everything you need, including a copy of Windows that's an eval version that expires after 6 months. So you'd be mindful that you would have to recreate this environment every 6 months, but everything else in there is kind of there ready to go. All the tools that you need ready to go.
So let me summarize what I think you just said, because I'm kind of a novice at this. I first go get my VMware Advantage license, so I have a VCF license, right? Key. Secondly, I'm going to build an ISO image, right? So I'm going to set up a folder somewhere and follow some instructions on my Windows box, right? To then set up the folders and then go from that, build my ISO image. And you've got instructions on where to put things in the folders, so that then I'm going to go build my ISO image. Once I get this ISO image built, do I need the keys to build the ISO image, or the keys used once I boot up the ISO image in a VM? I would assume, I don't know.
So that's a really clever bit. So as you put all these files into the right place, there is a kind of a file which you edit where you start putting in all your keys, and this actually
so I put my keys. Got it. So I build that, put my keys in the key file and then I say go build ISO image, and I've build the massive ISO image, and I can run it on my ESX that's already been installed on my massive little home lab, and then I'm up and running ish.
Again, once you've got the ISO uploaded, there is a few things you need to set up with the networking. And again, this is why I kind of joked a bit about, some people have never gone past that consumption model. So again, it's been that great bit for me, reminding myself to sit down with mentees and go, oh, so you've never set up networking. So let's go through that networking step. And again, the guides are very, very good. There's some great videos on there about, some people have never set up a VM kernel adapter. So it goes through that step by step about how to set that up. The beauty of setting this up is you do not need any fancy networking within your home environment. What this is doing is abstracting away all those clever, big stacks of switches and everything, and making them more virtually. So that's the beauty of this. It keeps it all in that as that nice bubble. And all essentially what this Holodeck VM needs is one IP on your network that allows you to kind of come back in. So
Matt, don't you can jump in if you want, but I'll jump in with the things that hit me, which is because this is a full VCF stack. You got NSX is switches, real switches, not just one, virtual switch. And therefore you're going to guide me in how to get introed to NSX networking for the dummies guide, where this will help me, so that then when my Holodeck comes up, I'll have NSX switching that I can start to learn about. Right. I mean, there's, So
it's exactly that.
I also think about the cost savings on this, right? You have some idiots over here that went out and tried to basically build a small data center in their basement that serves as a heat source for that side of the house, with 4 R420s and a top of rack 1 gig switch, and then 10 gig switching. And then even for a quote unquote home lab environment, I'm buying enterprise class SSDs. I'm buying HBAs, I'm buying 10 gig NICs, I'm buying interconnect cables. I mean, it doesn't take much to start to think about how this gets into the 5 figures, let alone what the energy consumption is. That is, the family reminds me of what it is when this thing powers up. And then there's what we call the partner acceptance factor as far as the noise within the environment. So you could make all of that investment, and sure, that's one way to do that. Or you could use Holodeck, and in a lot of ways, you're getting 90% there or 95% there with a repeatable environment that is set up, is what sometimes I like to say the Contoso model, right? Where everything's built as it should be.
Mhm.
If you blow it up, it's easy to recreate. Whereas I'm starting from, if I throw a wrong VLAN tag into my environment and it impacts if I have that VLAN tag set up on a kernel port that is on for vSAN, I could take down all of the storage networking, right? And then I'm going to backups and whatnot. Whereas with this, hey, I'm just going to do a redeploy. So
absolutely, yeah.
less hardware requirements.
Yeah.
Easier to build, and more consistency. Dare I say, for anyone that's thinking about doing this or even currently has home labs deployed, this might be what you should be leading with rather than trying to do it the idiot way over here and building a small data center in your room that now is a heating appliance.
There's one here.
It would be fun to know, and I'm going to have to do this, how many times an average guy that hasn't done any of this would have to start from scratch. Right? Like, I did it one time and then I blew it up. So, all right, start again, do it again, blow it up. Like 10 times later, I finally learned everything I needed to know to not break everything every time I get in there.
And that's part of the learning process. But then there's also, dare I say, when you get to the point where, depending on the level of the mistake and how far you're down the journey, to recreate everything. Mm-hmm. Right. I ran that into myself. That tagging analogy wasn't just a scenario that actually happened. I totally destroyed my lab and had to start over and go back to backups. But this is just such a consistent way to get you the entire stack, no matter what you want to play with. Right. If you're that Tanzu operator or even a traditional sysadmin that has been doing, let's call it Windows deployments, that wants to get over into the whole entire containers world, here's your gateway.
It's exactly that. I've actually started using this as a training mechanism and also like an adoption mechanism with some of my customers. I know this is a story for another. Everyone's had the shock with all the products changing. But again, one way we're now getting kind of into some of this is, we are, some of that hardware is quite easily accessible for some of these businesses. So saying to them, can you release a host? Can we deploy this on a host? Can I show you the ways of doing things? And again, it's one reason why I use it here. As you say, it's absolutely repeatable. So I can do something with a customer on a workshop for one day. We can go away. We can kind of go off on a tangent, start breaking things. And it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when I finish with that customer, I just hit goodbye, nuke it all, reattach the ISO image, hit deploy, wait 4 hours, come back, and I'm back.
Is that what it is? It's about, I remember reading through the blog, about 3 to 5 hours, depending on hardware from the time they say go.
Yeah, my best is about 4 hours 20. I've maybe shaved a bit off, but again, that's reliant on my hardware. I've tried tweaking things. I've tried putting Intel Optane in there. It's, when you're trying to do it on the edge of the box I can't get any quicker than that. But then again, 4 hours, I kick it off overnight. I wake up in the morning, it's done. So,
what's if you run into a failure point, mm-hmm. or have run into a failure point with a deployment script, what's the gotchas, if you will? What are the most common failure scenarios, or what are some of the common mistakes for individuals to watch out for at initial deployment?
So one I kind of allude to within the blog is always reverse DNS. It's always DNS. I don't care what anyone says. It's always DNS. So the first couple of times I did it, I realized every time I was redoing the Holodeck console, I forgot to set up conditional forwarding. So again, the key thing that drives all this, what that Magic ISO builds, is something called the Holodeck console. And once it deploys, that as a domain controller, I just need to point that back to my DNS server here, so it can see all my hosts. And of course, the
so it even goes
videos.
as far as within that PowerShell script, it will take that Windows Server ISO that we're packaging up as part of all the other bits that we need to have, and we'll stand up a Windows instance and then deploy domain services on that Windows instance?
Correct. And, I'm trying to go one step further soon and try and enhance that. It's a little footnote that I'm trying to do to try and make this, a bit more approachable. So you create some dummy users and whatnot. So, it makes it feel more like a real environment. Not that it isn't already, but it's just like, when you demo it to customers, there's a bit more real data in there. But, that is the first biggest thing whenever I sat down with anyone. Either if they're using DNS and it can't see anything outside, it's just you need to set up the DNS records correctly. The other one is the hardware flags. Of course, if you're using legacy hardware, there are some tweaks. Once Holodeck is deployed, you can go in and tweak some of the scripts to kind of override the hardware flag to say, ignore that this CPU is deprecated, and off you go. And again, depending on hardware, you may need to set one further flag for NSX just because of the page memories. And again, that's down to different generations of processor. So, it's quite well documented. If anyone gets stuck, do feel free to ping me a message, and I'm quite happy to point you in the right direction. But those are normally the three biggest things that fell. And you could maybe say a fourth, which is where I was pushing the boundaries. I said about the memory ballooning. If that happens too often, there are some natural timeouts in some of the deployments, such as NSX. It will just time out, crash and bomb, but you will get a massive, nasty error on the screen when you next log in. So,
and let's say that does happen, right? That there's an error during the deployment. Where are we finding those logs? How do I know what went wrong?
So literally, when you log into the Holodeck console, where everything is generated from, you get a very nice big PowerShell window that you see everything getting built. And the only thing I will say to everyone, don't panic if you see it doing nothing for anywhere up to 2 hours. Sometimes it will take some time, but if anything goes wrong, you will see it on that window. So once you've kind of hit that go button in the VCF constructor, it will pop up a PowerShell window, and that will stay there until you kind of come back to it. So the only thing I would say to people is try and click the mouse. Don't try and press enter or anything, because occasionally press enter too many times and the window will
get a
disappear.
false input into the PowerShell script.
And away it goes. So I'd say click the mouse, wake the Holodeck console up, but you will very clearly see what's gone wrong. Have I not been able to connect to the vCenter? Have I not been able to deploy the NSX manager? Have I timed out in some way? It will normally tell you quite quickly which one of those it is.
And I'm assuming that when we go to download these bits, right? Let's talk about life cycling here for a minute, right? We have the Holodeck instance stood up. The bits would be deployed on probably, let's say, the VCF 8 stack. And when I want to run an update, right, there's a new VCSA that comes out that addresses a bug, or there's something within the ARIA suite that I need to update. How is life cycling then taking or addressed? How do we life cycle the environment once it's stood up?
That is actually a really great question. At the minute, it does use, I wouldn't want to say the word dated version. So there is a previous version, but that is actually one great use case that I use with customers. So I actually use VMware Lifecycle Manager once the environment stood up to actually do any upgrades. So again, it's a really great way of showing customers, I know I'm deploying.
Here's LCM.
Here's LCM. I know when it deploys, it's a few behind, and I purposely go in there and do the upgrades. So that's, again, one thing that one of my customers come up with a use case for is they're going to have a host with this deployed. So when a patch comes out, they can actually test it against Holodeck and go, okay, it's not like absolutely perfect against our hardware, but we can kind of go, what happens during the upgrade? What might go up, what might go down? And, they can then kind of go, well, actually, we're more confident with it.
Right. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll jump in after this one.
It's, of course, not a like-for-like scenario, and it wouldn't. I would not recommend it for customers where we'd be validating production. But for test scenarios, right? For absolute test scenarios of rather than or where hardware is limited, right? Where normally we would be having to emulate production, you could stand this entire thing up on a single host. The use cases are tremendous. I go back to my lab example, and I think about even someone that has a home lab right now with maybe a storage array that wanted to go down the whole entire vSAN path, right, and play around with that, and storage-based policy management, and where we're at with. Can we do some of the advanced ESA features within this?
I haven't tinkered with ESA in it yet, but there's no reason probably why not. But again, that's another great use case.
Right. Again, just to think of what we would normally even need to deploy with, quasi HCL vSAN compatible. I mean, NICs, switching, enterprise class hard drives. Well, even if you're using, spinning disks for your capacity tier, I mean, all that adds up. Yeah. Whereas we can deploy this in a single host, and you're 90% of the way there, right? To start to play around with what a vSAN environment might look like, and some of what you can deploy as far as storage policies, and how Skyline tags in, and some of the feedback that you're getting within the vSphere console, as opposed to putting this on a traditional storage array. What a great learning platform for someone.
Yeah, Matt, that's what I was going to get at, and you jumped right into the thread where I was going, which was, we call it home lab, but the reality is we should refer to this as holodeck, the training environment, right? Or your virtual training environment. Yeah, it doesn't have to be at home. This is something that if my licenses just got changed to VCF, right, where I used to be a vSphere admin, and all of a sudden I'm paying for the whole stack, go get holodeck and start learning this stuff, so that you can come back and say, yeah, I think I know how we could replace some of the other parts and save us some money here, right? So it is a great training environment.
Right. We didn't have access to ARIA before. Hey, our storage array is coming up at a renewal for millions of dollars, right? What would this look like if we would start to, maybe even think about this whole vSAN thing, right? What does that even, some of that of the admins that are out there need to see that interface, right? They need to have that tactile feel of, well, I can read about this as much as I want, but how does this actually implement it? And what would it mean to set storage policies and whatnot? And
a lot of admins are kind of been floating, like, vSphere, we run vSphere. It's easy, it's straightforward, and it does most of what, and we just really haven't put that energy into going that next step. Right. And it is energy, because you have to define hardware. You have to get everything. This basically allows you to make that next step with a minimum investment, but everybody has to make that next step. Right. I mean, it's coming. Right. So
let's talk about CI/CD pipelines, right? Let's do, self-service portal for application deployment or service deployment. Right. Now you have the ARIA suite, right? Rather than having that traditional pipeline where the service desk request comes in and I got to build another server out there. Can we start to automate that process in a self-service console? Well, you have access to it, rather than going through and standing this up in a production environment. Here's the ISO build. Let's play around and let's see what this looks like.
Have you guys targeted VMUG and gotten some VMUG sessions? I think this would be a beautiful, meeting presentation for somebody to just come and do, a chapter meeting where, hey, here's holodeck. This is how we all can get started. Because I think this would be like fun to go to a VMUG chapter meeting and learn about this, or even a user con. Like, I wonder how much, and I have to talk to Brad about this and see if we can get, more holodeck buzz going around, everybody should be doing this. This is the next step.
Oh, absolutely. And, it goes back to my point of I tell all my customers to color inside the lines so they get a consistent experience. And exactly that. I'm trying to see, how can I get away with this in the smallest footprint? Can I tweak together some nooks or something like that, or a super micro that I could take? Dare I say, actually let the audience go play with it. We deploy some of it and let the audience play with it at a VMware and go, here you go have a go. And all those use cases, you're absolutely right. That's what I've started doing with some of my customers. Is, you said about the vSAN one, people are fearful of vSAN. It's like, well, here you go deploy a management domain and a workload domain with so many vSAN nodes, and then go remove disks, watch what happens, and it doesn't matter because you're not actually physically breaking anything. It's all software. And if it goes wrong, you just redeploy again. So you're absolutely spot on there, guys. It's a great learning tool. I'm going to coin a really bad phrase from a film now, and I've said to some people, it's going from zero to hero very, very quickly. I was like, really? I was like, well, I want to make you guys heroes in your infrastructure. Be that you guys within your own team, or as you said there, where if your hardware is capable enough, you can actually run multiple of these side by side. So you could then let developers loose on this. Go, here is your holodeck instance, the whole VMware suite. Tanzu the whole lot. You log into this IP address via RDP. It's yours. Go do what you want with it. Go try and break it. And if it's one of those things, they can then go in there and start understanding what your role is as well. And you can then start sharing that information between each other. You said it'd be great for VMUGs. Just
I want to see solutions that are built on top of this. I mean, Gareth, you and I know where we're at with the whole Horizon stack and building that out. But I'm thinking, the natural iteration with this is let's build on top of what Holodeck is offering, right? What else can we build into a repeatable, automated deployment environment for quasi lab, or as Eric likes to call it, the new learning environment, which I love. And how else? That's what I want to see at VMUGs, right? How can we take advantage of the Holodeck platform and then build other services on top of this for testing and learning?
I was
particular stack.
I was just thinking too. I was talking to James Rumkessel yesterday about what is the code lab going to be this year, and we think we should do some PowerShell, get it back to the basics, do that. It'd be cool to do a holodeck lab where we take the Windows machines, because they're all little Windows machines, and we go through the process of creating your holodeck. Right, go through the work of building the ISO image, so that everybody that does this lab will then walk away with their ISO image for their holodeck, right? That they can take away on a USB chip or whatever, and then take some, have an example of one, and then, show how it runs and do some administration on that as well. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. As I kind of alluded to, there's already stuff I'm playing with, Matt, I've got a love for Horizon as well. Sad to see it go. But again, I do a lot of work with AI. So I've been looking at this, like, how can I get some of these things in that? Exactly that. How can I get AI, like maybe running something in Tanzu where people can run a command and it will go off and grab some AI models, or it can run off and go grab certain, application stacks so people can, you said exactly that, go kick the tires and really understand how they can revolutionize their business with this. Because that's essentially what it is. If anyone knows EMEA CTO, Joe Bagley, I was in a meeting with him recently, and he absolutely nailed this to me, and it's just resounded with me so much. This is, yes, VCF is what we're pitching it as, but actually to me, it's a cloud operating system. Now, that's how he pitched it to my customer, and he's absolutely right, is you're deploying a cloud operating system, and understanding how that integrates with your business is how you're going to help evolve your business. And I sound like such a sellout, but it was just that kind of penny drop for me the other week. It's like, that's exactly right. We hit on at the beginning. Everyone's used to consumption now, and all this is doing is enhancing how business consume all those products.
Nice. I know we're running up to the top of the hour. We normally will ask, what excites you? What are you looking forward to for the rest of 2024? Are you going to be at Explore? Matt, I don't know if you have any other final specific things we want to run through with him, but I always ask, like, what excites you coming up for the rest of the year?
I do want to call out the domain again, where we have all of this of Gareth's wonderful article. So it is, again, what a great domain name, virtualizedfruit.co.uk. And listeners, browse over there, and I'm sure that you can find the holodeck entry and more information on all things within the VCF stack, and some great Horizon articles as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. What excites me this year, hopefully getting to see a lot of people, friendly faces in the community. I'm fingers crossed. I'm hoping somehow to get to Explore. I don't know how that's going to happen yet. It's very different when you're an employee. So maybe I'll just have to submit about 200 papers and pray to the gods that I get one in. Hopefully get some customers there. But the big thing for me is actually seeing a lot of people in the VMware community. So again, I help with a lot of the communities here in the UK, help with the UserCon. So again, that's a big focus. So I might steal your idea, Eric, and take some of the holodeck there. And again, a lot of it is just about getting back out there in the community and giving some talks and inspiring people. That's what's got me amped up for this year.
Nice. Well, we can certainly make that happen. This is one of the funnest subjects I've been on this year, right? Is that, we're all struggling with what does it mean to get VCF under our belt? What does it mean to take advantage of vSAN and NSX into our, and how to learn it and how to take those next steps. And this is a perfect model to help us. And, we got to go reach out and get your blog has the current hardware and requirements. And, we just have to make sure that we publish enough of that on where to go buy. Somebody in chat said, hey, go look at diskprices.com or something, I think it was. So there's just a lot of details in diskprices.com. There's a lot of details in making this happen. But I think that if we push through this as a community, I think between VMware Advantage and connecting those dots and then, getting out to the chapters and making that happen, I think it actually could be exciting instead of everybody, feeling stress over VCF. We could actually make it fun and, make it something that is easy to learn and easy to get going. So I love this. I love this session. This has been great. Right.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm happy to always come back.
Thank you for being here.
Before we hit the end, we do live stream on youtube.com/vbarbecue, VBARBECUE. You can go check that out and see what Gareth Edwards looks like and say hello to him if you see him. I'm sure we'll be able to get him to explore in Europe. I don't know about the Vegas bit, but I'm sure we'll get you here so that people can meet you and say hello to you. And shout out to Andy Nash. Sure, we'll get him over to London VMUG because that would be fun to do as well. Do you do barbecue? And if so, where are you and what barbecue do you make or eat?
So I'm based in the UK and I don't actually cook British barbecue. I actually cook Japanese barbecue. So I love a bit of teriyaki, me. So I've got a smoker out there and I will smoke up some teriyaki, be like salmon, pork, whatever, chicken. That's my style.
We do have the little Korean barbecues you can get on Amazon. They're like a little round pot with a thing, but it's flame based. And then we'll make Korean barbecue, the meats with the sauce, and oh my god! So yeah, barbecue is barbecue. It doesn't matter which country, what flavor, it's all good. So yeah, some good teriyaki, you can't go wrong with that. And we do the little half round pans on a little tiny propane. It's almost like a camp barbecue, and then we get 2 or 3 of those and set them up inside our house on the dining room table, and then everybody sits around and with their chopstick doing their own barbecue right inside. We're probably poisoning ourselves, but a lot of fun doing that, and man, it is good. It is good. Tony Foster,
go ahead. About barbecue this week from the great state of Texas, and I found this very interesting. It is faux pas in their nomenclature, at least in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, to serve barbecue with sauce in most instances. They consider or good barbecue to be the smoke and the outside, char and rub. And if you need to add any type of sauce or the traditional barbecue flavor in any way, whether that's a Southern vinegar-based barbecue or more sweet or tangy or heat, that's totally off the table. Right.
Yeah.
In many instances, it's not even served with any type of sauce. It is just the meat itself.
In Southern California, they don't even use that much rubs. It's all just about the flame and the charcoal and the smoke, right? They do nothing. And then other places, I think in Louisiana and some of the, Southeast, it is all about the sauce and it is all about, the wet barbecue. So yeah.
And on that fine note, those pesky customers are calling. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Eric, and we will catch you shortly.
At the top of the hour. Awesome, Gareth, Tony, thanks for being here. Sorry we didn't swing by you, but we're still online. So before we go, Tony Foster, any barbecue out of Kansas?
Yeah, I did a Casey strip here Sunday and a bunch of mixed vegetables to go along with it. Peppers and onions and all sorts of awesome stuff on the grill.
So you got good weather there in the Plains State?
I've got great weather. Yes. So highs during the day between 60 and 65 or 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And yeah,
Nice
it's
weather.
nice. Just have to watch out for the blowing winds.
Ah, that's all right. So strip steak, Kansas. What'd you say? KC strip.
KC strip steak.
Okay, yeah. And KC stands for Kansas City. Is that the nomenclature?
That is
Yeah.
correct.
Right, all right.
Yes.
There you go.
The strip steak, the KC strip steak cut was actually developed in Kansas City. Yes.
I've been doing a lot of thin steak lately, which I've kind of enjoyed, right? No sauce, just thin steak, lightly grilled up, so it tends to get cook really quick. Is that what KC strip is as well? Like a thinner piece?
No, actually it's fairly thick, but it's a cheaper cut of steak.
I see.
Because there's more of it to get.
Nice. Well, that makes me hungry, and it is lunchtime. Thanks a lot for everybody being here. We'll be back again next week. We're trying to go every week, Wednesday, 12 to 1. Thanks for listening, and everybody go get themselves some good barbecue or whatever you want to eat for lunch. Thanks a lot.